This is Mike Roberts. We're here at the Diamond Springs Cemetery today. I'm with the El Dorado County Cemetery Advisory Committee, and I've got a couple of guests with me to help tell the story of Diamond Springs Cemetery. We have Susie Mickus here and Marianne Schroth. They are with the El Dorado County Pioneer Cemeteries Commission, an independent organization, and we're all here to take a look at the Diamond Springs Cemetery, which is one of our really beautiful pioneer cemeteries. There's some interesting stories here. We'll try to capture a few of them for you today.
This is an 1871 map of Diamond Springs. Lot 7 has always been a public cemetery. This one, Lot 4, there was some questions about that in the past that have now been resolved. So we're dealing with this amount of property.
And it all looks like one big cemetery today.
Right, right. Come up to 2003, and the county has finally admitted that yes, this is a public cemetery, all of it.
Okay.
And according to state law, it needs to be fenced.
Okay.
Which it now is, and they also had ground penetrating radar done. We finally convinced the county that quit burying until you know what's in the ground, because
well, mainly though, the county took responsibility for this
yes.
as a pioneer cemetery because
yes.
it was started before what date?
I have the date in my records.
Okay.
Okay.
But wasn't the legislation?
Say Gold Rush days.
Okay.
Because it's a Gold Rush cemetery.
Okay.
Okay. As you can see by this map, we've got a tremendous amount of burials. These are the ones that were identified with ground penetrating radar. The ones over on this side, you'll see there is more open space. One of our concerns with Diamond Springs, as well as many, many other cemeteries, is these places are filling up fast. And what are the people of Diamond Springs in the area going to do, especially with all the new development coming in? Where are they going to be buried? The open space here is not going to last that much longer. So we need to think about that for the future as well. One of the other things that we did was to take an inventory of the tombstones at the cemetery here and then try to rebuild burial records, as we've done throughout the county with all of the cemeteries, Mike. Okay? And this is the product of the labor that went into Diamond Springs. These are the burials that we have documented.
So are these just the ones with headstones?
No.
So you've got records of people that aren't on headstones.
Exactly.
Yeah,
these are the list of unknowns.
Okay. So here's the knowns. These guys have headstones, and these guys have no headstones.
That's right.
And then you've got these guys and some of these guys that you've been able to chase down through other sources.
Right.
Records saying somebody was buried here at some point.
Exactly.
And maybe you don't know where they are.
Oh, that's right too.
And so are there any of these that you have a name for?
I can't answer that question right offhand.
Yeah.
Because what we did, and Marianne, of course, and our whole commission was involved, was pulling obituaries, church records. After 1910, we had burial permits that we pulled.
A tedious process of going through old records and looking for any references to somebody that might be on in here.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Hundreds of hours, probably.
Thousands of hours. Because remember, we did this county-wide.
Right, now this is for Diamond Springs Cemetery, hundreds.
Yeah. Quite often, sometimes you can tell where there's a, what's one of the names? Bathurst. Okay. So we start doing a family genealogy of the Bathurst family. And we pull obituaries out of the newspapers and probates and anything we can get our hands on. document-wise? Because chances are there's more Bathursts than just the ones on this list.
Right.
And through research, that's how we discover it.
Right.
And we figure, you know, if Joe Blow has a headstone and he's buried there, okay, well, his wife died 2 years later, gosh, I bet she's buried right next to him.
Right. Standing at what we think was the entrance to the original Diamond Springs Cemetery. And we've got a post here that's crumbling. It's quite old. And you see, using the anchors, the steel anchors that it's built, that were used to stabilize this concrete, are actually early grave markers. This is what the grave diggers put in the ground before the stone got placed there. You will actually see these marking graves in many pioneer graves, many pioneer graveyards. So the fact that they used them here as a cement anchor is just an indication of how historically we have not taken the artifacts from these places very seriously. This appears to be an old piece of marble, and we have no idea where it came from. We just find it here. Somebody wrote on it for Halloween. So it's discouraging, the amount of damage that we see, the lack of respect, and just the flat-out vandalism that's evident in these cemeteries. And so we're hoping that this video series helps to raise awareness of the situation in these beautiful old cemeteries in El Dorado County.
Yeah, the original fence was barbed wire here with 5 different rows of wire. Years ago, all our fences were barbed wire. You didn't have any chain link or anything like that. Didn't exist.
We have C.G. Carpenter, that's Caleb G. Carpenter, and his wife Sarah, right over here, immediately outside the boundaries of the Diamond Springs Cemetery. One of the things that the cemetery committee, the CAC, would like to do is to get this included into the formal Diamond Springs Cemetery. Caleb Carpenter was a very, very prominent citizen here in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. He had a big old wine and brandy cellar right here on this property adjacent to where he and his wife, and we think his kids, are buried. And also had something like 5,000 trees in his orchard and 125,000 grapevines, and he was quite the businessman, quite the successful businessman. His wife Sarah, who was buried here 10 years before he was one of the first women businessmen.
December 27th, 1879.
1879, December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, she passed.
He was aged 57 years, 9 months, and 7 days.
So in 79, at 57, she could have died of anything.
He was an heavy believer.
The Bradleys were one of the main families who did our beginning ditch systems here in El Dorado County. This is the Bradley. This is the son that died in 1853. Yeah, by 1853, the Bertram Bradley ditch was bringing water into El Dorado County. Okay, it was one of the main huge ditches.
From where?
Here in this area.
I mean, from what source of water?
Oh, I don't know.
That's okay.
I don't know. But this is young Mr. Bradley. And by 53, a lot of the miners had moved on to other places.
Yeah.
And agriculture started in, okay, and taking over. But there was a huge drop in finances.
Oh, yeah.
With the Bradley Enterprises, ditch enterprises. And so he had that on his mind, and then he got a Dear John letter from his fiance, and
sounds like he had a rough life. And his stone has had a rough life as well.
That's right.
So what we've got here is a classic example of a stone which is in bad shape, and we've even got an example of, I don't know how old it is, but it appears to be holding a preservation effort. A little bit crude and manual, but better than nothing. So we're in subsequent chapters of this story, the El Dorado County Cemetery story, we'll talk more about what you can and can't do on these old stones. And we'll see a lot of evidence of attempts to glue them back together that have failed. And we'll discuss some of the pros and cons of the various strategies. But right now, this is a great example of a beautiful one of a prominent person in our history that we'd love to preserve and love to do what we can to keep this thing in one place. So this is a part of the work that Susie and Marianne and I are committed to. Here we've got an example of vandalism, most likely. This has been busted up and carried off. One of the missing markers. In this case, because the Pioneer Cemetery Commission has researched all this, we probably know who's buried here, but it's not guaranteed. So this is what happens when we do nothing, is lots of this. Here we got an example of some of the beautiful old ornamental ironwork that's in these cemeteries. And this one only has 3 big chunks missing, actually 4 counting that. But you can see how there's actually been some preservation done on what's here. The Oddfellows have prepped, primed, and painted this black in the fairly recent history, but before that, chunks of it were broken off and stolen. In many of the cemeteries, there's just small little pieces, hints of the beautiful ironwork that used to be there. And it's one of the many things that gets lost in these cemeteries when they're ignored.
This is Luther Cutler, and he's another very historic figure here in our county. He died in 1882. He was 64 years old, so the tombstone tells us. And you associate his name more with Sly Park, because he was the owner of the Sly Park Hotel, also called the Park Hotel. Just a huge entrepreneur here in El Dorado County. And this has to be his plot, because that's another Cutler tombstone there. We'd have to check my book to find out exactly who he is.
These guys were affiliated with Sly Park. What exactly might they have been doing at Sly Park? Obviously, there's no Jenkinson Lake there in this era.
But it was Luther Cutler who established the Sly Park Hotel, because remember, we're talking about people that are traveling through El Dorado County from here to perhaps Nevada, back and forth, that kind of thing. A lot of roadhouses.
So they were roadhouse managers.
Mm-hmm. Builders and owners. And yes, Sly Park area is the area that Luther Cutler is really known for.
So you think he might have had like a franchise on the Placerville Toll Road for a mile or two of the toll road in that area?
I don't know.
It's certainly something that can be researched. We'll leave that up to you. So here's another great example of some beautiful metalwork that's in great shape. This type of cladding was likely mass-produced someplace and shipped here. This is intact other than a few pieces, so it's a beautiful example. And what we've got here is another example of a much less beautiful phenomenon, and that is children in pioneer graveyards. You probably can't read that, but it's 10 years old on this side, it's 8 months old on the other side, and not sure. Okay, so this was an adult here, but we do see a lot of young children. Kids died frequently in the early going here. Now, it's the old cemeteries that were along the transportation routes, you don't see the phenomenon, because the travelers that died in our inns and lodges along the way, they were typically adults. But when you get off of that main route, the Placerville Toll Road, what's today Highway 50, you see a lot more children in these graveyards, and it gives you cause to think. Cholera, flu, even malaria. There was outbreaks of all these things up here in the early going, and they took quite a toll. Susie and I are going to point out a few other interesting things here. For starters, we've got one effort at tombstone preservation here. You can see that the original stone was broken in a couple places probably and was set in concrete. There's some discussion about whether that's a legitimate approach or not. Susie, would you like to make any comments about doing this as opposed to anything else to preserve tombstones?
Well, this was done, I think, back in the 1960s, perhaps by a man by the name of Bob Brookins, who was hired by the county to take care of 42 cemeteries here in this county. He did a wonderful job, absolutely wonderful. And it was Mr. Brookins who quite often would take broken tombstones, lay it in concrete at an angle so the water didn't collect.
Yeah, this is an angle.
Okay. Because that was a better way to preserve what we had. Remember, we're talking quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
Okay. So he did a great job. Footstones,
We've got a
gosh.
footstone here.
You know, we've lost so many because people pick them up and haul them away.
Right.
So it's nice to see a footstone there still.
All right, a couple other things I'd like to get you to comment on. What's going on here?
Oh, I was just telling Marianne a while ago.
I think this is off of that.
It would be interesting to know where this base goes.
So they hauled the whole base off.
Okay, remember from the map though, this is the old section.
Right.
We are standing on graves now because they were just one right after the other.
Yeah, well, I'm kind of thinking it's a eerie
Yeah.
feeling.
Yeah.
One last thing while we're here. We've got a downed tree here. So a dead tree fell right here. And this is another hazard that our cemeteries face. It's not just the stones that are old, it's the trees. They get old, they fall, they take out the stones. And it can be quite expensive to have trees cut and cleaned up in these places, and there's nobody to pay for this stuff. So that's another challenge that we've got.
Yes, we do.
Here we've got an example of stones versus no stones. Susie, how many graves are in this portion, this section of the old cemetery, the old section of the cemetery? How many would you estimate?
Hundreds and hundreds.
All right, so what we see are a few busted stones, and we know that there's hundreds of bodies beneath us, and as we walk around and periodically sink in up to our ankle, we have a pretty good feeling what we're walking on. We're going to take a look at what is here. Is some leftover vandalism that hasn't been hauled off yet.
Yeah.
This is an 1853 gravestone of an 8-year-old child, 8-year-old boy, Henry. And this is what's left of it. Now, what is this?
This could be one of two things. We see a rock, but it could be a marker, a corner marker for a plot, or it could be a tombstone in itself. A lot of people couldn't afford to buy formal marble markers like we're seeing, and they could only afford a rock, and so that's what they used.
All right, so what we're seeing here is another example of a tree problem, and this one's been taken care of. We believe the county did this, but we're not 100% sure. But this is a very large, very dead cedar tree that's been standing here and might have fallen and threatened some of the beautiful old stones here. But somebody came in and took care of it. And as you can see, it was a massive tree, and it was probably a great deal of effort and cost a lot of money. So whoever did it, thanks. This is another example of a child grave here in the old portion of the Diamond Springs Cemetery. What we're realizing is that the only stones remaining here of the hundreds of bodies that are here are all children's stones. So it's almost like the thieves and vandals didn't have the conscience to take the children's stones with them. But this one's interesting because the footstone is intact, so you can see the smaller size of a child's body would have been right here. And this it looks like, can't quite read it, looks like 5 or 6 months old. This is under a year infant. Quite likely associated with this family plot here. You can see the crumbling coping. Obviously the cement mix wasn't up to snuff when they built this, and there's nothing on the inside visible at this point of this family plot.
And this has happened so often throughout our county. These are the bases for tombstones. And as you can tell, oh, we have the base, but we have no tombstone.
What about this?
That's a corner marker
For a family plot?
for a family plot.
So there would have been probably here.
That might be a good guess. And we might actually find more cornerstones.
Yeah, if we were to dig, right?
Well, even if, because it feels like there's something right here even.
But it needs to be sealed. Here we can see some epoxy. I mean, you've got, somebody's done something here, you know? And that's really neat.
This is just so sad. Look at the beautiful ironwork from this grave plot for the Bowling family and how it's been damaged so badly. It'll take a little bit to restore that. Looks like a tree fell on this one, on this side over here. But really, this is far less damage than I've seen in a lot of other cemeteries. This wouldn't be that hard to do.
So the Diamond Springs Cemetery, as much as any of them, represents this spectacular slice of El Dorado County history. And, you know, for example, we've got this beautiful little plot here, little Jacob, 9 years old. These are real people. This is real stuff. And it's just this quiet little piece of our history that we're letting go of. And there's no way to get it back once it's gone. So that's why we're doing this. Thanks.